Killer 7 is set in an alternative 21st century in which world peace has been achieved. However, this equilibrium is under threat from a terrorist organisation known as Heaven's Smile. I could say that Killer 7 is a shooting game in which the player completes assassinations for the US government. However, this would be a gross oversimplification, especially where the plot is concerned. A more accurate synopsis would be to say that the game revolves around battling invisible suicide bombers, talking to ghosts, donating blood, and putting strangely shaped objects inside matching strangely shaped holes. In Killer 7, you'll be playing as Harmon Smith, the leader of the Smith Syndicate, aka the Killer 7. Harmon is an old man in a wheelchair, but he's not as helpless as he may seem. For starters, he has a badass sniper rifle within arm's reach. The main reason he's so deadly, however, is his ability to morph into other members of the Smith Syndicate, due to a condition known as multifoliate personae phenomenon. Garcian, the Cleaner, the dominant personality when outside of combat situations, and the only personality to directly communicate with Harmon. When any of the other personalities die, Garcian will need to carry his briefcase to find and collect their remains, which are conveniently placed in a paper bag. He'll be using his silenced pistol to clear the path. And since he's so much taller than the other personalities, aiming from his viewpoint adds a subtle challenge when playing as him, since you'll need to aim downwards towards most enemies. Dan, the Helium, a cocky badass in a simple yet stylish suit, who casually carries his Colt revolver over his shoulder. He can charge this revolver with blood vials to fire a powerful slug known as the collateral shot, which will be required to defeat certain enemy types. Kaidea is my favourite personality due to her ability to very easily score critical hits on enemy weak points and get that sweet blood. She's barefoot at all times, so moves pretty slowly and also takes a while to reload, but she makes up for this by being able to attack at range and can use the scope on her custom hardballer to widen this gap further. In certain areas she can slit her wrists, causing a geyser spray of blood, which in turn attracts a gimp who points at a wall and makes it disappear. Coyote, the Thief, an expert on breaking and entering. He can pick any lock and jump real high. He's so gangster that his gun is held so far sideways it's almost upside down. He also does some great swears when hitting crit points.
You're fucked.
Kevin Smith is a mute. He's a mysterious character that wields throwing knives and can turn invisible by taking off his glasses. He can also perform a useful quick turn maneuver to get out of tight spots. Con, the Kid, a speedy little chap that can tear it up at turbo speed through the halls, and like Kevin, he can quickly flee when things turn sour. He dual wields pistols that he rapidly fires off and reloads with his feet. Considering that he's blindfolded by his bandana and is wearing headphones all the time, this is pretty impressive stuff. Mask the Smith, a mild-mannered lucha libre wrestler in a suit like El Santo. He uses 2 grenade launchers which can instant kill most Heaven Smiles, but until upgraded will take forever to reload. While reloading, Mask is vulnerable, allowing the Heaven Smiles to get closer. However, this is right where Mask wants them. In fact, he's so incredibly strong that he can headbutt bullets out of the air. The main enemies that the player will be facing off against are members of a terrorist organisation known as the Heaven Smiles. The Heaven Smiles are demon-like creatures with twisted smiles that are invisible to the naked eye. When in proximity to the player, they will let out an unnerving cackle, before attempting to get in close and self-detonate. Appear in various forms throughout the game: standard, giant, tiny, inside eggs, round, and many others. Each type will have a specific technique needed to defeat them, and it's an interesting challenge to try and figure these out using the hints that the game gives. Most of the Heaven Smiles will have a yellow glowing weak point. Shooting this weak point will net an instant kill. This can prove quite challenging, however. Since the weak points are on limbs or the head, a near miss will often take off the limb, making the crit point no longer available, but won't prevent the Heaven Smiles from coming at you. They'll keep coming until they take a certain amount of damage, even if you blow their head clean off. Since hitting a crit point is a cleaner kill, more of the blood can be absorbed. But why collect blood in the first place? Well, the blood in Killer 7 comes in 2 flavours: thin blood and thick blood. Thin blood is used to heal and power up certain abilities. Thick blood is donated to the TV in Harmon's room, which can be tuned to the blood room channel. The doctor on this channel will take your thick blood and convert it into serum. This serum can then be used to enhance the stats and abilities of your killers. Each has their own set of stats to upgrade, and reaching a certain level in a stat will award a special ability, such as a down attack for when enemies are crawling at your feet, or a double tap, which occasionally causes you to fire twice from a single pull of the trigger. Since enemies will respawn indefinitely, in order to prevent you from being able to fully upgrade everything too early, the blood machine will break down after a certain amount has been collected in each level. This can be a little bit frustrating, especially when you visit the room with 1000 deciliters of blood and can't donate any, but it's clear to see why they took this approach for balance reasons. Harmon's rooms are spread throughout each level and serve as a forward base of sorts. They each contain a CRT TV used to swap characters, enhance abilities and donate thick blood, Harmon's maid, who will let you save the game while Harmon is awake, but abuses him when he's unconscious, and Iwazaru, a ghostly gimp that hangs from a string. He shows up at various points throughout the game to give hints, but here in Harmon's room he serves as a kind of how to play instruction manual. Its explanations are rather abstract, often explaining vague concepts of how to play rather than being as specific as press button to do thing. Like most things in this game, the core gameplay is unusual. The player's movements are restricted to set paths that they can move backwards and forwards along and change directions at junctions. At first this feels very awkward, and it's easy to see how people would be put off by it. There's also no way to control the camera, which follows the action in a cinematic fashion, framing the shots in a way that's aesthetically pleasing rather than being optimized for action. Since the heaven smiles are invisible, in order to see them the player must swap into first person mode to aim and scan for them. This mechanic along with the camera can lead to some very tense moments, especially when close to corners. You'll often hear an enemy's sinister cackle but not immediately know where to look. Seldom have I encountered such a strong sense of sheer panic in a game. While it may not seem so obvious at first, the whole game is based around puzzles. Each mission has simple puzzles scattered throughout. For the most part, these boil down to finding a strangely shaped object and putting it into a strangely shaped hole or slot. Other puzzles will involve using rings of power, which are found in the mouth of a decapitated head. These rings are used in fairly obvious ways, such as using the ring of fire element to do fire stuff. Solving these puzzles will be needed to access the next part of the level or to find a soul shell, which are the currency paid to the gatekeeper of the Vinculum Gate. Once the player has collected enough soul shells, they'll be able to move into a corridor, stay for way too long listening to the music played in this section, and then move on to a boss encounter. Near each puzzle, a ghost named Union will show up to offer hints in exchange for blood. However, the puzzles are really far too easy for this to ever be worthwhile, and he'll often show up in locations just beyond the puzzle anyway, meaning that the puzzle will likely already be solved before you even encounter him. Each enemy type and boss is almost a mini puzzle in itself. These puzzles boil down to shooting, of course, as they're combat based, but you'll need to learn the specific techniques and timing in order to beat them. The other thing that could be considered a puzzle in this game is the story. I won't go into detail, but it's extremely confusing, and after playing the game I was left with more questions than I started with. After reading through the plot again on the wiki page, I still feel like I barely understand. The game is full of symbolism and references to concepts such as Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and Chinese philosophy. As the player explores each level, they'll encounter the ghosts of the Smith Syndicate's victims, or as the game refers to them, remnant psyches. They're an interesting bunch who will pop up from time to time in order to give hints or otherwise help add detail to the story, while also revealing tidbits of information about themselves. They speak in a strange mix of garbled English where it mostly seems like gibberish but certain words are clearly audible. I'm sure by now you've noticed just how stylish this game is. The tone is set early on as the player navigates through the slick initial screens to the game, with audio feedback of cackles, gunshots and truck horns. The simplistic cel-shaded visuals look super sharp on the remastered PC version, and it has beautifully animated cutscenes between certain missions. The script, dialogue and voice acting are all exceptional.
No, there's always time for fun. It's Friday night. Let's dance.
There are some really insane over-the-top moments in this game, like when a guy grabs a bullet and uses it to pull himself over to a nearby tower. The soundtrack fits the tone of the game perfectly while being extremely varied in terms of genres. These elements all together with the gameplay give Killer 7 a truly unique look and feel. In this game, even getting killed is cool. Aside from the obvious graphical upgrades of the PC version, it can also be played with a keyboard and mouse, which makes aiming so much easier. I found that I was able to hit crit points more often than not, especially when playing as Kaidea. Another advantage of the keyboard and mouse controls is that the player can switch characters using the 1 to 6 keys. The transition is still painfully slow, but saves having to go through menus first. The default control scheme on the PC, however, does still take some getting used to. The right mouse button is used to turn around rather than aim, which can be problematic if you've built up muscle memory from playing first-person shooters. The control scheme can actually be reconfigured, but the default does start to make sense after some practice. Even when using a keyboard and mouse from the very beginning, the tutorial showed Xbox buttons throughout, making it difficult to follow. I have mixed feelings about this because even though this section shows signs of a bad port, which is really not, the animated icons for the button prompts are some of the best that I've ever seen. As each control is introduced to you during this tutorial section, I'd recommend pressing the F10 button for a control reference so you know what to press later on. Back when it was released, I played the original on GameCube using a CRT TV, and while the remaster is superior in a lot of ways, there's something lost in the feel of the TV menu in Harmon's room when playing on an HD monitor. Killer 7 was originally released on GameCube and PS2 in 2005 to a polarized reception. For many it was just too out there, and a lot of people didn't like the movement or control systems. It was Suda51's first Western release, and really put him on the map as a game director in the eyes of the world. Personally, I think Killer 7 is a fantastic game, although in all honesty I did feel towards the end that it was starting to become a little bit repetitive and my attention was only being kept by the story. If it was any longer, I may have resented it. It's a difficult game to fully explain, so while it won't be to everyone's taste, I recommend trying it for yourself.
I feel my blood rushing through my body. Yes, this is it. The feeling, it's coming back to me. The sensation of killing. The doom and darkness. The dark streets. They're calling me to the ultimate ring.